Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for the introduction and all the housekeeping. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday and welcome. During this presentation, we are going to discuss the approaches to discussion forums that actually promote student ownership of reading assignments and activities. So there are going to be three presenters today, myself, Sonia Thompson. I am from Empire State College, as well as the other two presenters. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Noreen Masella. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Nursing and Allied Health at SUNY Empire State College, and I teach both nursing and allied health students in grad and undergrad. And Jackie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Michaels. I'm an associate professor in the School of Nursing and Allied Health at Empire State College, and I teach nursing students in the Bachelor of Science nursing program and the Master of Science nursing program, both of which are totally online.
And I am actually new to the nursing department. So I'm an instructional designer, and I assist and support both Noreen and Jackie in developing or revising fully online courses within the School of Nursing. So I'm thankful for them joining me today, because they are the two faculty members that really introduced me to this new approach for discussion, for the discussion forums. So we'll be taking just turns throughout the whole presentation today. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to kind of run through discussions in general. So we all know that discussion boards have been a staple item of online courses for decades now. And we know that they can serve many different purposes and have many different advantages. One potential advantage is that it allows for the instructor to actually pose a question in a way that they can gauge student comprehension of a certain topic or concept. And with the online modality, that just posing that question allows the student the time to carefully reflect, synthesize the information in writing, whose kind of depth and subtlety would be just totally lost in kind of that like heated face-to-face discussion. That time, it gives them that time, that clutch time to more or less really put together a very thoughtful post, a very thoughtful reflection, backing up maybe their opinions with research, information from the readings. So another good benefit of the online synchronous or asynchronous discussion is that it minimizes the risk that one person or one student is going to dominate that entire conversation. And also, if you kind of set the criteria appropriately for the discussions and the expectations for discussions, you really can get 100% of your students posting and discussing and having that rich back and forth conversation that we're looking for. I mean, you even can kind of draw in your introverts and those that are a little bit shy that might not discuss, raise their hand or discuss something in a face-to-face situation. So there's all sorts of different types of discussions, right? There's the administrative types. Those are your like kind of where students can just throw out and ask a question about how to use the technology or the LMS. And often even fellow students will jump in and answer questions, or the instructor will. There's debate, hot topic kind of discussions, which really can generate a lot of postings and that back and forth we're looking for. There's peer feedback, just allowing, again, students to kind of come in and just offer an alternative idea or about a certain topic. Application, there's interpretation, there's all sorts of ways that you can just send out different prompts to students to get their feedback. But one particular thing that we're going to talk about today is how do we use a discussion to assess the student's mastery of reading assignments. So when we talk about the reading assignments, I'm not really just talking about like the textbook chapters for students, right? So now that we have online the ability to not only ask students to read from the textbooks, we're asking students to read articles from our library, or go out to the web and read blogs or web pages. We're asking them to view videos. We ourselves, as faculty members, we put lectures online, right? So we find that like 100% of the academic content that we need students to be reading and comprehending, how do we really know that they are reading, watching those videos, looking at diagrams, whatever it may be? How do we know that? So one way that we could do it is, sure, we could quiz them at the end. We could say, go out, read this, watch this, and we could send a quiz out to them. But another way that we can do it is that we can take a little different approach to the discussion questions, and that a little bit I find to be less traditional that we see all the time. I think that students and faculty members are getting a little bit burnt out on that real traditional post where you're just asking questions that are unrelated to the reading and then looking for responses. So today we're going to talk about kind of a couple different alphabet soup type non-traditional approaches. And we're going to really focus today on the QQTP.
Okay, so the first type of discussion we're going to talk about is QQTP, which is questions, quotations, and talking points. Jackie and I have both integrated this approach into our courses. We're long-term colleagues from here and other places. And if I remember correctly, Jackie was exposed to this in her doctoral work. And this method allows students some freedom in exploring the assigned readings. So the purposes in this method are encouraging a deep understanding of course material, allowing them to explore, apply, reflect, analyze, and question the course content. And rather than having them all answer the same exact question, which is more like a mini paper, it allows them to explore the material individually and then contribute something unique, but toward a common understanding of the material. So it kind of holds them accountable for their reading. Next slide, Sonia. So the way QQTP works is that students complete their reading or other assignment, and sometimes I'll use a specific chapter or article, or if I've assigned a couple of chapters or articles, I might give them a choice about which one to include in the discussion. So there's some variety in the overall topics on the discussion board. Jackie and I teach in totally online programs, so discussions are really an integral part of the courses. So for QQTP, they take notes to gather information. They post a question to engage others in reflecting or analyzing that particular concept. Then they include a favorite quotation or a quotation to prompt discussion among the class, and then a talking point. And the talking point personalizes the reading a bit. It might be something like how it applies to that student's experience, either professionally or personally, or it might be something that they accept or reject about what they found in that reading. And so using the QQTP method, it becomes more of a true dialogue and less of just writing down or exchanging information. This method was developed by Patricia Connor Green, and there is a reference on the last slide in case you're interested in reading about how she developed this. And next slide. So we included an example of instructions from a QQTP discussion assignment. This is the first assignment from a junior level undergrad course called Cultural Competency in Healthcare. And it includes an explanation of the method because this is the first assignment where they would come into contact with it. I'm not going to read it, but Sonia and I worked on this course last summer. It's in the Community and Human Services division. And here, students were all assigned the same article, and they were given instructions for what to include in their initial post and what the requirements are for interacting with peers. So I asked them to respond to at least 2 peers' posts, and then also to stay engaged in their own discussion thread. So again, I'm not going to read the whole example, but it's here for you on the PowerPoint in case you're interested in some detailed information. But discussion posts using this method really have a much greater variety than when students all answer the exact same question. And so now I think Jackie's going to take us through the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Noreen. Yes, and thank you for that introduction. So I was introduced to the QTP in my doctoral program in a qualitative research course. And we do have the reference. I believe it was published in Psychology Today in 2005. So I teach a course in the Master of Science in Nursing Education program. And the course is titled Measurement, Assessment, and Evaluation of Learners and Programs. And in this course, students learn about a variety of methods that they could use to evaluate and assess learning. And I've used the QTP discussion format in 2 discussions for about a year now. So I'm just going to share with you some of my examples of student responses and some student feedback. So 2 of the modules of this course have built in an open book multiple choice quiz. And we know quizzes serve a variety of purposes for our students. The intention in this course is to familiarize the students with concepts and content that are new to them, to also expose them to questions that are on a national nurse certification exam for nurse educator. And they're eligible to take that exam once they complete the program. So I use the QTP as really a method to help students review the core content before they take the exam. So basically, I'm like using it for a test review, a student-led test review in that. So I encourage students not to take the quiz for that module until they have posted their initial discussion post in the QTP, until they've read some of their peers' posts and responded to them. So this really lays the foundation for the rest of the course. So this first example, I'm not, like Noreen, I'm not going to read the entire example, but you could see in the question, this student encouraged their fellow classmates to really explore the benefits of group projects and strategies that could be implemented to ensure student satisfaction with group projects, which is one of the chapter readings. I will read the quotation though, and the student quoted from the course textbook and said, when students are involved in learning experiences that inspire them to achieve their personal best, they are more likely to develop a love of learning, which will compel them to strive for personal excellence through life. So the student took this right from the readings, and then they're encouraged to analyze why they thought this quotation was important in 1 to 3 sentences. So this student said, I think especially in the online environment that both student and instructor involvement in the course is crucial to increasing knowledge and satisfaction. So I really find this discussion format poignant for me because the students are really engaged in these readings. They're learning how to be future nurse educators. They're really analyzing the content. And then they are encouraged to put in 3 talking points. And this student's talking point review the purpose of test blueprints, benefits, and how a test blueprint contributes to validity of content. Next slide, Sonia. So the second example I'm sharing from a student, and it's just a couple weeks ago because they're engaged in this right now. The student encouraged their fellow classmates to explore test bias and how that could be avoided, how that could be shared, and their own personal experiences with it. And it was really interesting because in nursing, it's really been a female-dominated profession. And I do have some male students in the class. So this discussion turned into a discussion on gender bias in nursing and education, and really brought to light for me some concepts I had not thought about. The question, this is another or the quotation, this is another great quotation. So this student said, students sometimes resist discussion because they perceive no reward for participating. Active participation is much riskier than simply listening to a lecture. Fear of embarrassment is one of the most compelling forces behind student passivity in class. And this quotation is actually right from the Connor Green article. And I believe, if I'm correct, Connor Green used this in actual face-to-face classroom. So the student reflected on that and said she chose this question because she's guilty of preferring not to participate in discussions in the past. And it's not that the student felt like they didn't have anything to contribute, they're just naturally shy. So it really gave insight into how students feel about discussions. And some students commented a lot on that quotation. And then you could see the student went to the readings on the talk point, and she really analyzed and synthesized the course readings and reflected the importance of instructor grading fairly, and how she learned through the readings, how rubrics help ensure fair grading. And that led to a really robust discussion on fair grading. I'm going to turn it back to Noreen now.
Thanks, Jackie. This is what instructors are saying about QQTP. And when Sonia and I revised this course last summer, I wasn't teaching the course. This isn't a course that I have taught before, but I teach in that program, and I was asked if I'd be interested in revising it. So there's actually a wonderful adjunct professor who's been teaching this course for years. And we included the QQTP approach to the discussions. And I'm not going to read this entire quote to you, but it really thrilled me that they shared this with me. I was thrilled to get such positive feedback from the professor. She also passed along some student comments from emails, which went to Sonia and to me and to, I think, the department chair. So it was really thrilling that it had the QTP method was so positively received by both the students and the professor. So here it really is shared that the method helps students to organize their thoughts, analyze and engage, and think critically. And that really is evident in both student and instructor comments that we received from this. And I think Jackie has some information from her students as well.
Yes, Noreen, thank you. So at the end of the course, students participate, they do a reflective journal, and send me their thoughts about how they're going to implement what they have learned in this course in their future roles as a nurse educator. And I've been teaching this course for about a year. As I said, it runs spring, fall, and summer. And I've had students reflect on the QQTP. They're not asked to reflect particularly on that, but they do share their thoughts with that. And you could see, and I am going to read these students' posts because I think they're just so valuable. The first student's thoughts were, I valued the quotation, question, and talking point exercises that we utilized for several discussions this semester. This format provided a good opportunity for me to think critically about the text and highlight what I felt was important. While I found creating a question challenging, it provided excellent practice for my future role as an educator and highlighted a need to develop further in this area. So this student really developed some skills for their future role as a nurse educator, and realized, that these discussion questions are really hard to formulate. So really got some insight into that. The second student, this was another meaningful reflection. I was apprehensive when the first discussion involved questions, quotations, and talking points. However, this soon became my favorite type of discussion. It provided us with flexibility to choose what talking points we thought were relevant, along what additional information we wanted to incorporate. We were also able to drive the discussion based on the questions we developed. I found I learned a great deal from my classmates and about myself. And several students have told me that over the last 3 semesters, that they wish they had more discussions like this. And as an instructor, for when I'm grading, you know, you have like this one question and it feels like sometimes you're reading the same thing over and over again. And it really brings the discussion so interactive and so engaging. And I tell the students also, like when they're preparing for the quiz, you know, really get in these discussions, because sometimes you might have missed something in your reading and your classmate is bringing that up in your discussion post. And then the third student, just this last semester, the most important concept taken away from implementing the question, quotation, and talking point format. I love the format. It allows the student to express themselves, their thoughts, and their interests in generating a QTP response to the module's content. Next slide, Sonia. So during the past year, I've really found great success with using the QQTP. The instructions that I provided to the students and what I envisioned was to have them develop one question for their classmate, choose one quotation, and explain in 1 to 3 words or 1 to 3 sentences why that was important. And then construct 3 talking points in about 3 to 4 sentences, really analyzing and synthesizing core content. So we've explored a variety of topics. The discussions have been more engaging. There's a lot more activity with this. Some things that came up though that were interesting to me. One student who was a very concrete thinker wrote to me and said, does my question, quotation, and talking point have to be developed around the same theme? And I said, no, it doesn't, but it just put an idea in my head that in the future, maybe I could present it that way. So I really think you can modify the QQTP as you see fit. And it's really up to you on how to integrate it and modify it with your students. I'm going to pass this back on to Noreen now for a discussion on other alphabet soup approaches that you could use to make discussions engaging and interactive.
Thanks, Jackie. This next slide has the 3CQ, which is complement, connect, comment, question. This was developed by Jennifer Stewart Mitchell, who is a high school teacher who sought to train her students in effective communication in an online discussion forum. I like this approach because it starts with a compliment when responding to classmates that encourages engagement. It sort of reminded me to like when you give students feedback on an assignment, how you use the sandwich method. You know, you give them something positive and then you might say, well, this is where you can improve, and then, you know, end it with positive as well. And not that you have to put negative things in the discussion. It just kind of reminded me that one of the keys to effective communication is to, you know, start off on a positive note. So complimenting them by saying something like, I like, you know, I like how you addressed this or that. And it reminded me of, you know, whatever it was that it reminded you of. So students will often say something like, you know, I like how you addressed family-centered care because it reminded me of a time when I took care of a family that, you know, whatever the situation was. So it does help students to sort of explore different areas and ideas. So this method, the 3CQ, provides a model for communication that doesn't always come naturally. It helps students to build a learning community by connecting and sharing those positive comments and compliments with one another. And it helps them to formulate questions that promote deeper understanding of the material. I have not personally integrated this type of discussion into a course yet. As a matter of fact, Jackie and I collaborate often because we've worked together in several different settings. And if you go to the next slide, Sonia, I'll talk a little bit about the TQE method. And I'm beginning to analyze or to revise a course right now. And I thought about putting the QQTP in it. And then Jackie and I were talking and we thought, well, let's try something different because we also don't want students to kind of get tired of the QQTP. So we're going to try the thoughts, questions, and epiphany. And I have actually fairly well developed a draft of an assignment that I plan to use. I'm not going to read the entire, prompts to you, but I just want to explain a little bit how how I came up with this. So the TQE method means that the focus will be centered on thoughts, questions, and epiphanies. If you'd like to read more about the approach, it's the Gonzalez reference that's on the last slide. And it illustrates, again, this was used in a high school class. It was a high school English class, which was face-to-face. I've adapted this for use in an online graduate nursing course called Contemporary Issues in Healthcare. So we're going to try this. The course was developed around 2014-15, and it included several issues that were prevalent at that time. And some of those are still relevant. However, what I want to do is to make it truly have a focus of current issues that the course would be relevant whenever they take it, whether it's now or in 2 years, so that I want some flexibility in what issues the students address. So I started to think through the assignments, and of course I started with the learning outcomes. And 2 of the outcomes, I'll just read you 2 short outcomes, are analyzing emerging trends and themes in the current literature related to healthcare delivery and practice. And then the second one is to explore current healthcare issues through an ethical social justice lens. So I'm early again in the process, but I think this will make sense to everyone because I believe that everybody has been exposed to current health issues in the past 1.5 years because we've lived COVID. And so in our library, I found a very short webinar transcript from one of the federal agencies. It was from January of this year. It was just a few paragraphs, and it was focused on healthcare leaders navigating challenges related to COVID and the impact that the new administration coming in last January, who would make changes, the impact that that might have. So in this webinar, they gave 3 takeaway messages in this transcript. And I'm not going to read you the messages, but what I plan to do for this discussion is to ask students to look at that transcript and think about those 3 key takeaway messages and share their thoughts about which of those 3 takeaways was most relevant in their practice or piqued their interest the most. And then I'm going to have them find an article about that topic that's published within the last year. There will definitely be things published in the last year because there's been tons of things published as a result of changes from COVID. So then they would formulate 1 or more questions about it to include in their discussion post and share their epiphanies about the article that they chose, and then encourage them to share other insights that were gained from their peer interactions. So I do have a draft of the discussion assignment completed. So if anybody wants more information, you can feel free to contact me. But basically, the assignment will provide a short explanation of the method, letting students know, that this should help to increase our depth and breadth of knowledge because it helps them to dive into one of those 3 topics a little more, and then sharing their thoughts and experiences from their varied practice settings and previous experiences sort of helps them, dive in deeper, but have a broader sense from people who maybe practice in a different setting from them. them. So a nurse who practices in the ICU may have a very different outlook on something from somebody who goes into people's homes or practices in a community clinic or a doctor's office. So that really helps with the breadth of knowledge when they share those kinds of things. So again, this is a draft, but it does provide a little bit of a how-to in getting started to start thinking about some of these assignments and how you might change things up a little bit. So let us know if you would like some more detailed information. And I think the next slide is our references, but I'm wondering if Sonia and Jackie have anything to add before we take some questions.
Yeah, I just want to add that, as an instructional designer, I was thrilled when Noreen, you brought the QQTP to my attention, and I've had very little resistance from course developers. I start talking about this new approach, and they've been really willing to embrace it and excited about it. And I go back to the course, Noreen, that you and I first developed. That was my first experience in that one undergraduate human services course. And I too was just blown away I've never had like an instructor just, email me and the whole team and say, wow, this was absolutely an incredible new approach in the discussions. I mean, for her to say it took the discussions to an entirely whole new level for her, not only for the students, but even for her, was just so great to hear. So I think it really does kind of reduce the burnout from an instructor, teaching the same course term after term after term, because they get used to just, what they post that one, the prompts, and then students are every term kind of just, it gets very predictable, right? Students come back with that same response, and instructors are kind of like, oh, I've heard this before. It just takes the students just completely take ownership of that discussion, and they relate it to their personal lives and their professional lives. And it keeps the conversation going because they're asking their fellow students about, what do you think about this? Or I didn't consider that before. Those talking points that they throw back out there to their peers. And I just have never had such a great response to a new approach. So I was really thrilled to get that feedback back.
There is a question in the chat. The first was Whitney asked if you could go back to the references section, please, the reference page. And then David has asked, I'm curious if anyone has tried perusal. Instead of discussion boards, students can post comments directly on the reading itself and interact with each other that way. I have no idea how or if it actually works, but it sounds interesting and might pair well with these discussion approaches.
I've not heard of perusal. I definitely would check it out. I don't know if anyone else who's, in the audience might have tried it. So feel free to chime in if you have.
It's similar to Hypothesis. So if anybody has experience with Hypothesis as well, it's a similar function.
I haven't heard of either one of those, so I'll be interested in Googling that and seeing what those two approaches are all about.
We do have a couple webinars on Hypothesis on our CPD YouTube channel. So David, Hypothesis is the same thing. It's a social annotation tool. I think we have some faculty at a number of campuses who are using it.
So do the readings have to be electronically embedded in the course? Like, are they sharing the same electronic reading?
It actually works. It works just in general on the web. It doesn't have to be within the course that perusal or Hypothesis works. It works, in various formats. So that's my understanding. I have not actually used it, but I know a number of faculty have. I'm going to try to look up a link for the video that they covered that. So I'm going to post the link to the hypothesis webinar here in the chat. It's kind of neat. And I think David's right. It's a way to get them discussing critically the information in a not a post a main post and 2 replies kind of way. It's read through other people's comments, integrate that with the information that you're reading kind of situation. UB doesn't support perusal, hence why I don't know much about it. Does SUNY seem to generally support hypothesis? It is not free. There are some campuses that do support hypothesis, others that don't, and so some faculty have just kind of integrated it into their own courses individually. Any other questions for Sonia or Noreen or Jacqueline?
Yeah, Jamie, we do have the actual instructions that we present to students online, so that it introduces them, you know, to the whole QQTP approach. It's in this PowerPoint, so that folks can really just kind of, if they would like to try this, and I would encourage them to try it, they can go ahead and just grab those instructions, edit them to meet their own needs, and just pop it in their course, and they can get going. I think students have embraced it and found it. I was a little nervous that they're going to, we have to, you know, a whole new approach. I'm going to have to learn it, and I'm going to have to, the instructions are there, and they can just take it and run with it.
And the instructions are in the presentation, you said?
Yeah, they're in one of the slides, the exact instructions that we put into the first discussion of the online course.
Okay, great. So we will be posting that presentation on the www.suny.edu/otter website. So, you know, check back a little bit after the presentation's over. There is a question. In terms of grading, would you say this approach takes more, less, or about the same time to grade?
I would say for me, it takes about the same time or maybe a little less, but they're graded. We have a discussion rubric, so they're graded by the discussion rubric in the course I teach. What I find is that the discussion is more engaging. So for me, it's interesting, you know, to read their depth and analysis. The students have also said, I wish the students in the course I teach are one course from graduation. They're one course away from their capstone. And they said, you know, I wish I was, this was integrated early on. It was so interesting. I believe the Connor Green article, which is referenced, has that approach to grading that she used in there. So you could review that also. I don't know, Noreen, if you find that the same as me or different.
Well, I haven't taught cultural competency, so I haven't graded discussions on this rubric. Terry speaks very highly of it, and I think again the engagement part is probably graded higher, but I don't know about the time factor. And as far as the rubric goes, you know, in nursing programs, because there's a question in the chat about sharing the rubric. And I think that's on the table right now. I know in our department, nursing rubrics are notorious for being constantly and repeatedly under revision. So, but I don't know if, you know, if you want to share the current one, Sonia, can you get that to people? Like, I mean, I don't know where it would go.
Yeah, for the nursing or undergrad, because they use the two different rubrics.
Yeah, there's two different rubrics. The cultural competency uses a different one.
Yeah. I could actually download into a Word doc or a PDF and get that out to folks if they're interested, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thanks, Sonia. I would imagine too that the interaction, that the engagement between the participants in the discussion forum kind of cuts down on the amount of work that the instructor has to do in the discussion forum, right? Generating that conversation, keeping that conversation going, modeling best practices, because the students are more engaged with this method. correct? So it might seem like more work, but end up being less work. There's a question from Whitney. Can this approach be used to start discussion in a face-to-face class as well? I'm finding my discussion posts for my senior seminar are shallow and just regurgitated in class.
Yes, Connor Green's example in the article actually used it in a face-to-face discussion, I believe. And it's been a while since I've read the article, but I believe students, do their assigned reading, their assigned work, and come to class, and they're to have this ready to participate in the actual classroom environment. And then there is a grading approach for that face-to-face class. And I think that feedback the one student gave me, was reflecting on her feedback of when she was in face-to-face classes, how she was always the one who was like the last to put her hand up. And so I think this puts it right out there for students. You're going to come to class and this is how we're going to approach discussion. So I think it would be a great approach. I no longer teach face-to-face, so I don't have experience with that. But when I did, I think I would have liked using this.
I agree. And I think it's the other one is the TQE. It was also actually developed for a face-to-face class. The publishing, sharing, and commenting was developed for online discussions, but the Gonzalez and the Connor Green references, those were both first developed for face-to-face.
Whitney just posted, she just wasn't sure what approach it was initially used for. Thanks. It's nice that it's kind of ubiquitous. We could use it for remote, face-to-face, online, high flex, all of those.
I think, I agree. And I think too, asking students, like the first thing that they have to post is a quotation, right? They might be nervous about, starting off with, including something, an opinion about the article or the textbook or whatnot. But, it's, you're just picking your favorite quotation, something that really stood out or something that surprised you or something that you hadn't heard about. It kind of just eases them into the rest of it, right? It's pretty non-threatening. Just come up with a quotation, a favorite quotation.
That's a good point. Any other questions? Does anybody have any, thoughts to share about how they might integrate this in their online or face-to-face classes? Letting that awkward silence, right, that we're supposed to do to encourage participation by students. Makes everybody anxious.
Well, I hope people will give it a try. I think they'll be very surprised by the results they get from students, the activity they get from students, and the depth and the breadth that this approach affords. And I think the instructors will be surprised as well.
I agree. Well, any other further questions? Does anybody want to kind of, Sonia's a wealth of information, so I would encourage you to tap her brain a little bit for, even if it's not about QTP, about discussion forums, how we generate that engagement. We can certainly expand our conversation a little bit. Has anybody else found a different approach within their discussion forums that has generated kind of student engagement, excitement? Please feel free to unmute yourself or post in the chat. So getting lots of thanks. Scenarios to apply content to. Diane, do you want to expand on that?
Sure. Basically what you do is you write a short fictional scenario, or you can use a real case study, but it's easier to write it to your specific target outcomes if you write it yourself. But you write a short scenario that incorporates the kinds of things. Let's go with social work since that was brought up today. You might have a parent who is a single parent and they're working with their child who has a disability and they're trying to work with the school and so on and so forth. So you lay out all the pieces that are relevant and important. So you set up the case. And then if that module was about, family school interactions, let's say, advocating for your child or something like this, then you could go ahead and have them use content from that module, a framework if there was one, or a theory if there was one, and they can apply it to this situation. So they could analyze the case, they could make recommendations for the case, and people are going to view it differently and see it differently. So it's for debate and discussion.
Yeah, I agree, Diane. I find that the case scenarios are another great approach to really get the students engaged in the discussion, because they're then asked to come up with what would they do next in that situation, and to back up even their opinion or their solution to that situation with what they've gleaned from the readings or a video that they were asked to watch or whatnot. So yeah, those tend to, I think, generate some fairly good discussion.
They do, Sonia, and I teach an educational planning course for the allied health professionals, and we integrated a case study into it about a year ago, and it unfolds over a couple of modules. We used to have a written discussion, but now the students actually create LearnScape videos where they're participating in team meetings about the student. So like the case is there, and the respiratory therapist will say, oh, this is what happens when the patient goes to ICU. And the physical therapy person might say, oh, these are my ideas and recommendations. And the video kind of makes it a little bit more engaging too. And it's pretty easy to embed.
Like people could use Flipgrid for that, or another type of tool like that. That's great. Paula says, I'm building a course now where I embedded a Padlet board within the Blackboard discussion area. This will give students access to different modalities for posting their discussion threads. I was bored with the text-heavy Blackboard threads, and I think everybody's bored with the text-heavy Blackboard threads, right? So, changing it up with the alphabet soup discussion forums that we're discussing here, or doing the scenario like Diane, or the video ones like Noreen was just referencing. I think that's a great idea.
And Noreen and I are actually, was it Noreen or you and I working on, or is it Jackie that, no, I think it's Jackie that we're working on even an elevator speech.
Yes.
Yeah, that's you and I, yeah.
It's a nursing theory course, and there's this module on the history of nursing theory, and there's like 12 theorists, and it's kind of, they've heard about these theorists. So to make it more engaging, they're going to do a elevator speech with LearnScape and post their thread of what they found significant or pertinent about this theorist. So we'll see how that unfolds. So I'm excited about that. Just a new take on, Florence Nightingale. They've all learned about her a million times. So it will be interesting.
I've done something similar. I have them make a fake LinkedIn profile of historical figures in psychology. It kind of makes them dig deep into who they are, what their education is, what their kind of shtick is, what they stick to within psychology. It's kind of neat, made it more fun. Paula is posting, discussion boredom is actually part of my dissertation direction. If anyone is willing to have a non-discussion conversation sometime. Great. That sounds great, Paula, thanks. All right, any other question for the panelists today? I appreciate that we were able to get a discussion at the end of our discussion presentation today. All right, so with that, I'm going to thank everybody for your presentation. Noreen, Jacqueline, Sonia, I really appreciate you telling us more about the alphabet soup, and for whoever's writing on the board, fantastic. And so I'm going to stop the share here and the recording, and then I'm going to post the videos of the otters, and we'll get started again at 11 o'clock. Thanks to everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.